Hey everybody, Brian here from quantlabs.net. Well, the last couple of weeks I've been getting a lot of new varied questions about how do I get into quant, how do I get into programming, what sort of programming requirements do I need for quant, or some even want to go all the way to high frequency trading. I decided to make this presentation to cover those questions, specifically all the major languages. I'm going to give you my own opinion on my experiences with each. Been doing this for a number of years now, and I'm going to talk about my special choice. And by no means not to slag any of these in any way, but they have special use cases for trading and under certain conditions. So let's get to it. So what are we going to cover for best trading uses? I'm going to have a set of notes I'm going to cover. Now I've categorized the languages into either prototyping, research, and interpretive scripting languages. And then of course we've got our legacy compile languages as well. And then I'm going to break it out with MATLAB, which kind of spans in both worlds. And then the last part, which is lessons to be learned from my experiences, critical factors you need to consider when you want to go into a live trading mode. So the first set of notes is I want to make sure I don't do any comments on databases. That's a totally different ball game. We're just talking about core algorithm strategy development from an idea. I'm also not going to get into risk management, let's say, or portfolio management. Again, that's extra plumbing, as I call it, and that has really nothing to do with the algorithm strategies themselves. What we're focusing here is doing a market data acquisition to an order management or trade, executing your trades basically. All right, first set of language we're going to cover is R, Python, and MATLAB. So these are your languages that you would typically use to model your trading ideas. A lot of research happens here, so this is really more prototyping type of languages. Remember, these are scripting languages. So, as I said, these are scripting and interpretive languages. The first one I'm going to talk about, called R. Now, with R, I've recently dibble-dabbled with it a few months ago, and I noticed that there's a splintering between two major versions, between 2.15, let's say, and 3x. That's a big problem in terms of the development and maturity of a language. R packages are not compatible with certain paths of these versions, and it becomes very confusing, and they're really not future-proof. Also, a lot of the R packages can be broken because they're sort of open sourced, so not with a vendor behind them, and they can be broken for, I've heard, months, no potential fixes. One of the other big beefs I have with R is when you're working between different R packages, you have to transform different data types from one compatibility to another. And when you start doing stuff like that, it really hinders and holds back the performance of the language, or your script particularly, and it really breaks down the simplicity of the code. Some other stuff. Here's some good stuff. I really like RStudio. I think it's an excellent IDE, Integrated Development Environment. One thing I like about it is because it's all self-contained, but the problem is you cannot extend it. Now, when you try to extend it to, let's say, Java, using RJava or Caller, we've also gotten a lot of people asking about how do I do this, how do I do that with both of these libraries from the Java world. Another problem with R is it doesn't have any real solid order management for trading. And the other last part is it's slow. And I've heard about some strange hacks, but if you're into that, have fun with it. Next language is Python. Now, same problem Python's having with two versions that seem to be splintering, 2.7 and 3.x. Another problem is there's too many options with all these different IDEs, Anaconda, I don't know, I'm losing track of them, I can't even remember them. That's how much they are real important, they mean to me, which is nothing. But that's a problem because it confuses the standard from within the world of Python. What are you supposed to use? Nice thing is some really nice data packages, math packages like pandas or numpy. One beef is it's really slow. So no matter how the experts in the world of Python speed it up, I find it's very cryptic and it's a very painful process to go through to speed up your Python script. Nice thing is, moving into this year, MATLAB 2015B supports it natively, is where you can call it. And also Microsoft has enabled you to use Python within Visual Studio 2015, which is nice. Now, the other question you need to ask is when you come up with these awesome trading scripts in Python, how do you extend it to a live trading app? Let's say if it's built in if it's built in C++ or Java. Another thing that I think people need to be really concerned about is it has limited order management capability. There appears to be no direct support for standard APIs from big brokers like Interactive Brokers. If there was, I know about it, but I haven't seen it in the last couple of weeks. So let's move into more of the legacy languages, that you can use for live or production trading. These are also compiled languages as well. They cover Java, C#, which really covers .NET, and then of course C and C++. So with Java, I worked with Java for a couple of years. I find that the frameworks are really over-engineered. I don't know why, but it just seems that Java developers like to make things a lot more complicated and a lot more heavy than they need to be. And I think that's why a lot of the good Java developers have kind of like moved off of Java and moved into the world of Python. Really cool thing about it is still the original vision of the language is that you can write it once and deploy it anywhere with the JVM. That could be on Mac, Linux, Windows, whatever. Now, Java's considered where you can use it for ultra lowest frequency for high frequency trading. But from what I've read and what I've talked to various people is that they have to hack the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine, for optimal performance. That's something I personally wouldn't want to go down. Now, if you're trying to use some kind of graphical user interface like GUI, it's really limited. The only real library that I've seen that's really worthy is JavaFX, and even still in that realm, it is very limited. Now, the performance of the language is quite good, out of box, no customization needed. If you're trying to extend it into other languages, it can be kind of limited. But for any newbies out there, you should pay attention to this because if you want to learn a language from scratch, I would start with Java. That's something I would look at. Now, one last thing you need, a lot of people ask me, is the performance, which can be limited by the garbage collector, which is true. Now, the other language that I've gone back to for now, for productivity purposes, and Interactive Brokers limitation on the API purposes, is .NET and C#. Again, for newbies, I think this is the language that you should start with. If you're new to programming, it's really easy to understand and grasp. The other thing is the tools like the Visual Studio is the best IDE I've come across, and I still like it. And I'm also including IDEs like Eclipse and NetBeans, which are secondary compared to Visual Studio. Now, the big drawback, well, obviously with .NET and C# is that to really run it properly and natively, it's only really good for Windows. That's for optimal performance. Yeah, there's the mono and all that, wine and all that stuff for Linux, but it doesn't make sense to me to go down that path. If you're going to go down that path, that's why I put Java as the second language to learn if you want to stay in a Linux world. But I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Now, the other good thing about C# is that there's a lot of advanced techniques, and that's all thanks to Microsoft Research, which I would consider is probably one of the best research teams out there in software engineering. The other cool thing about C# is you can easily integrate it into C++ backend dynamic linked libraries or DLLs. It's really nice with that. Nice other thing about Java, or sorry, with C# where you can integrate with other databases quite easily. You can do the same sort of thing with Java Hibernate, but that's kind of getting dated, and that's where I was mentioning about how things kind of get heavy. Now, I capitalize could here, but the performance could be limited with garbage collection. Depends what you're doing. So you're not going to get optimal performance. You will if you're just working with everything out of box. But once you start trying to modify certain or do kind of like shortcuts or some kind of advanced type of development, you could hit some kind of hindrance with a garbage collector. Now let's get into C and C++. This is a complicated language. I mean, I've developed for over 30 years, and any language that I'm always technically hit by is this language. Doesn't mean I don't want to use it, because I do. It is a highly adaptable language, and it works obviously both in Linux and Windows. But again, you have to consider make sure it's cross-platform as well. Out of all the languages out there, all languages lead to this language, C and C++, where they try to compare their performance against C or C++. So it's the most optimal performing language for speed. You have full control over the memory, and there's absolutely no garbage collection. And that's one of the reasons why this language can be kind of complicated. If you're trying to learn for, let's say, career, it is the de facto language to learn. So if you're wanting to learn about quant analysis or high frequency trading or in some kind of HFT shop, this is a language you got to know. As I said, a lot of the high-end, high-speed institutional systems are deployed on Linux, pretty well 100%, and it has a lot of the built-in optimization integrated, usually with some kind of kernel customization in Linux, let's say, or with some kind of hardware deployment, usually on an FPGA. Alright, so that brings me to MATLAB. Now, I like to say MATLAB is a very universal, not just language, but a platform in itself. It's great for all the things I've already talked about, prototyping, scripting, and it also has the ability to really nicely extend it to the legacy languages I already mentioned, C++, C#, and Java. Now, if you're new to the whole scene, and I'm going to talk about this, the cost, I would embrace this platform more than any other platform over Python. I'm going to tell you why. It has a lot of powerful toolboxes that cover all your universal needs when it comes to trading. This includes all your data acquisition from some kind of provider, covers all your advanced analysis, and it also has some toolboxes that cover the ability so you can have order management as well. Again, your trading execution, which Python really are limited on. The really powerful thing that you can do with MATLAB, when you can afford it, because this is a commercial platform, but when you can afford it, you can generate code to C or C++ with strict compliance through something called a MATLAB coder. Now, on top of that, you can also extend any M script, a native scripting language in MATLAB called M. You can directly call it from Python, C++, C, Java, .NET, and even Excel add-ins. That's kind of nice. So it's very agnostic to all that technology. The prototyping for research, you could get access to it for any component built around Java or .NET or Python. No issues there. Now, the other thing, it has obviously advanced trendy support, so I call it, for machine language, quant, advanced math support, and tons more stuff that you'd never think of. There's also a nice ability to embed your scripts into a very high performing web server, what they call a MATLAB production server. And even the webinar I watched today for MathWorks is that you can use that and co-locate that in a trading exchange. Never thought that I would be able to say that, but that's what's coming out of MathWorks. So that's a big advantage. Also, for high frequency trading, you can visually design your trading model or your idea with Simulink or Stateflow with code generation to C, C++, or even FPGA, which is your ultra lowest latency. Again, I just said, think HFT. I don't know of R or Python that can do that. Another nice little extra bonus, as we can call it, is MuPad. You can use that to verify your scientific notation equations to get the code 100% compatible with what you see in things like research papers. Now, I've already talked about the home edition. A lot of people say they can't afford this, that, and the next thing. You could probably get a really good prototyping environment with MATLAB Home Edition for starting at $150 and add on each toolbox at $50. It's really good, and it makes it again affordable because when you look at open source programming languages, there is a cost. It comes down to time, performance, and how productive you are, and things like, as I said earlier, future-proofing your language and compatibility of all the dependencies that you rely on, specifically R or Python packages. Alright, so that's just mentioning that, but there's a lot of considerations you may not think of. These are critical factors for getting yourself from point A to point B, which is your live trading environment. The big one that's going to be limiting you is the broker that you choose. In my case, I'm using the Interactive Brokers. I am using their API. I find it, even from my experience of development, I find it's very confusing. So hopefully you've seen a couple of my videos on TWS Link 2. That's why I use it, because it makes life a lot easier and it shields you from a lot of complexities using the Interactive Brokers API. So again, your broker will be your limitation. Another big one that you need to factor in is who you're getting your data from. My choice, I do like, and actually I'll say I love IQFeed, but it only works on Windows. You know, you can kind of work with it with Linux using Wine, maybe. I can't verify it, but that's what the VP said. Now, again, between Interactive Brokers and IQFeed, the only languages that both support are Java, C++, and C#. Okay, so that's why I call them legacy languages. That's who's using those languages for both IB, Interactive Brokers, and IQFeed. Now, I would love to be on pure Linux. It's more lightweight and more control over the experience. But again, when you're starting out with a smaller account, now you have limitations. So beggars cannot be choosers. So a real option is really Interactive Brokers. So if you want to move to a pure Linux, as I said, your trading account needs to be fairly significant. In my case, if I was to go the next step, I'd probably want to go with Lime Brokers. But you definitely need to start at $500,000. Okay, so you need to be aware of that. The last one that's very important for newbies, you want to work with things that will make you more productive and it's easier for you. You tell 20 minutes into this presentation there's a lot to consider, and yet I did forewarn. I did not talk about databases, I did not talk about risk management, risk assessment, I did not talk about portfolio management. What I just talked about is a very much smaller portion of the entire system that you need to consider. But these are the things that you need to consider on your language choice and specifically your operating system, on top of who you go with as a broker and as a data provider. Hopefully this will help you out. Talk to you later.